Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Really excited today because we're checking out a volume 2 of one of my favorite omnibuses, and that is the New Mutants Omnibus Volume 2. So without further ado, let's take a look at the book. Here is the cover of the book, and I don't normally like when they do this horizontal thing, but I got this because I like the spine of this version better. Here is the spine of the book. I think it's a really good one, and like I said, I just wanted to have Magik on the spine. She's one of my favorite characters, so I wanted to see her represented on the shelf. Here is the back of the book. Magneto takes charge, and then we've got laid out the issues that are in here like most Marvel omnibuses do. Alright, so first of all, what does this collect? Well, this collects New Mutants, number 35 through 54, New Mutants Annual number 2 and 3, New Mutants Special Edition number 1, X-Men Annual number 9 through 10, Power Pack number 20 and 33, the Limited Fallen Angels Series number 1 through 8, the Unlimited Firestar Series 1 through 4, New Mutants War Children, and material from Web of Spider-Man Annual number 2. Now that that's out of the way, let me just say I am so thrilled to get another opportunity to talk about one of my favorite teams and what I believe is one of the best books from this era, which is of course the New Mutants. For those of you who are unfamiliar with them, this team is basically the second student class of Charles Xavier. They're the mutants who are powerful but too young and maybe too inexperienced with their abilities to be full-fledged X-Men yet. And it is such a diverse team in power set and also just identity, and that makes the book work so much better, I think. We've got Illyana Rasputin, aka Magik. We've got Dani Moonstar, Warlock, Cypher, Cannonball, Karma, Sunspot, Magma, and of course Wolfsbane. And normally the professor would be, obviously, Professor Xavier, but at this time he's presumed dead and has entrusted his young mutant class to none other than Magneto, who's on his own little path to reformation at this time, from his old terrorist take by force and apologize to none ways. By the way, this is a volume 2, as it is probably obvious to you watching this video, but I will say if you haven't read volume 1, I don't think it's necessary. I think this is a very accessible volume 2 and you get all the information you need. So just saying that in case you can't get your hands on volume 1 but still want to read this one. But anyway, volume 2. So what's new with the New Mutants? Well, this starts off with the Asgardian War storyline, which is just such a solid tale where we get some story beats focusing on individuals that compromise the New Mutants as they are navigating being thrust into Asgard. And this is by Chris Claremont, Paul Smith, and Art Adams, so you know the story is going to be solid, and you know the artwork is going to be as equally solid and helpful for conveying the emotional depth of what's going on. Basically, our whole team of the New Mutants has chased after Loki because he has kidnapped Storm, but they get separated and have to find their way back to each other. And some really important stuff happens here too, so definitely don't skip this one, even if you're someone who, may not be into Thor stories, or maybe you just don't like Asgardian stories, but there's some really important stuff that happens here that's important for later in the book, like how Karma reverts back to her old body. This is also where Dani gets Brightwing, her Pegasus, and she also becomes a Valkyrie, which is super important for other stories in here. And other important stuff happens here too, especially with Magik for her narrative through line, so you want to make sure you read this one, and you should anyway, it's good. There's a lot of iconic moments and issues in here, and I really enjoyed everything in this book, guys. There's this amazing introductory issue where Magneto does something that proves to the hesitant students that he is going to be a different but effective professor and headmaster, though shortly after that, Secret Wars 2 happens, and something really traumatizing happens to the New Mutants because of the Beyonder, and they end up as sort of these lifeless shells of their former youthful selves, and Magneto doesn't really know what to do, so he ends up relinquishing the students to none other than my favorite character, Emma Frost. So there's a super enjoyable arc, for me at least, in here where the New Mutants join Emma Frost and her Hellions, which that group has always acted as a foil to the New Mutants, so it's super fun having them all together under the same roof. Now, Emma does fix their mental state, but eventually the team goes back to Xavier's school to be once again under the tutelage of Magneto. But do you guys know who Empath is? Because he's one of Emma Frost's Hellions, who is a sociopath and has the ability to manipulate emotional states. And one of my favorite issues and storylines in here comes from him doing something really bad, and the New Mutants find out what he did, and we get a whole issue where they just effortlessly team up to bully him so effectively, and it's so fun and satisfying, especially knowing that Empath really deserves it, and he's such a slime ball, so he got what was coming to him, but it was so good. Now, that was kind of just a fun one, although it still had an important message intertwined in it, but there's a lot of issues in here that are really deep and really make you think, and some of the magic of the New Mutants, I think, is that the storylines have this youthful, vibrant energy, but they also get sucked into these very adult and real-world conflicts. Like, there's a suicide issue in here that's pretty poignant and pretty dark. There's also an issue that highlights Dani, who, by the way, gets a lot of spotlight in this volume, and I have become such a fan of her. She's such an effective leader and had a great spirit and energy to her throughout this entire run. But anyway, there's an issue in here where she's trying to save the life of someone who basically wants her dead, and it is just this fantastic character study, and it's all told in just this one singular issue, with no panel wasted and no thought bubble wasted. It is really, really good. I have a video series that I need to continue, but it was basically me sort of taking a look at each of the New Mutants at the start of Claremont's run to the end of it and sort of analyzing their ideological evolution throughout it. And that is something that is really noticeable in the book and is done really, really well by Claremont. It's just each of these students come from such a diverse background. They start at completely different places ideologically, and they have such growth throughout the series, and there are a lot of singular issues where a lot of that happens, and it is just, they're really well done. Like, there's also, equally, speaking of team leaders, who are, by the way, Dani and Cannonball, there's an issue that Cannonball, he goes home and he sort of looks after his family there for a bit. He introduces them to his girlfriend, but really it's sort of this analysis of like responsibility and the path of life, and how sometimes you have to let certain things go, you have to make certain sacrifices, and it was just also really well done, and it was just a singular character-focused issue again, and I think that sometimes is where Claremont's work really shines. And just on the subject of our cast of characters here, there is another character in this book that they were introduced in the first volume, and I was a little ambivalent towards them, I wasn't entirely on board. I thought they were conceptually fun, but I wasn't sure they were going to be done justice, and of course, I don't know why I thought that. It's Claremont, and not that he's a perfect writer and he's always writing the perfect stories, but he usually hits his mark, right? And that character that I'm talking about, of course, is Warlock. Warlock is an alien who ends up joining the team, and he's not really a mutant per se, although I think in the Fallen Angels series, which is also collected in here, they sort of categorized him being a mutant in a sort of more figurative way than a literal way, because they were saying Warlock comes from an alien race where it's sort of, war-bound, and children have to kill their parents to prove their worth, and Warlock's whole thing is that, that's not him. He's sort of about love and compassion, and so they're saying he's a figurative mutant in that way because he's different from his entire people. Now, on Earth, he's obviously has powers that stand above normal people because he is not a normal person. He's a techno-organic creature, a shapeshifter, really. He can sort of bend his body to be whatever form it needs to be. But the humanity that is poured into him and his relationship with his team, and especially with his best friend Doug, Cypher, was so heartwarming and endearing in this book. I cannot help but, sort of hold Warlock up as one of my favorite New Mutants now. And he's really funny too. He's a really comedic character. It's always fun when you get sort of those culturally different characters who come to a new environment, and, the culture he's from is space and the new environment is Earth, and they're sort of trying to navigate it, and there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think this book grabs that well. And a decent portion of this book is also the resolution of that whole, Magus, his father, chasing him down to fight him storyline, which is a storyline that surprisingly took us through space and time, so we got to see some alternate future stuff as well, some alternate versions of the team members, and I always enjoy that stuff, and I thought it was really fun, so that story in here is also equally solid. Like I said, this is just a lot of solid storyline after solid storyline, guys. As I had mentioned, the Fallen Angels limited series is also collected in here, which is basically this little story that is focused on Sunspot, and the inciting incident is basically he injures Cannonball, and he feels really bad about it. His team is really mad at him, so he runs away and he goes on his own little adventure where he learns things, and he runs into the Fallen Angels, which are this team in New York that consists of like the Vanisher and Boom Boom, and that's sort of where those characters are from. There's some wonky lobsters that are involved in there, but I'll let you read that and figure that out for yourselves. I don't want to give away too much there, but it's a fun little mini-series. I didn't think it was as spectacular as some of the other mini-series that I've read before, but still, it's fun, and I like the focus on Sunspot, as he's also one of my favorite New Mutants. Another limited series that we get in here is actually focused on one of Emma Frost Hellions, and that is Firestar. We have the Firestar 4-issue limited series in here, and I've actually done a comic book analysis and an examination video on that one if you want to check out my in-depth thoughts about this storyline. But to be brief with it, this is sort of another one of those stories that examines the mutant metaphor, and it does it through the lens of someone sort of growing up and sort of like an ideological puberty, I guess. Lots of Emma Frost in this storyline, lots of Firestar, who is great and later joins the New Warriors, which is also a good book. Emma Frost is a little gaslight, girl boss, gatekeepy in here, but you know, we still love her, and you know, even if she did do something atrocious to a horse in the storyline, sometimes girl bosses have to do atrocious things to horses. I will let you read that and figure that out for yourself, or like I said, if you just want to check out my Firestar comic book examination and analysis, you can do that as well, and I mentioned it in there. But I do like this limited series a lot, and it reminds me actually of the Magik limited series, which is like one of, if not my favorite comic book of all time. Now, this isn't quite as great as that, I think, or quite as poignant an examination of the same themes, but it does deal with similar things, and it does deal with, you know, a mutant being groomed in a sense. So it's worth a read for sure. And Firestar is a really fun and fascinating character, so that I'm glad that she got this some time to shine. Unfortunately, it seems like she doesn't get that as much anymore, but hopefully she'll be voted on to the new X-Men team, and we'll get to see a lot more of her. It's also just a shame that we never got like a serious Hellions, you know, book from this era. That would have been so fun for me. I was always really fascinated with Emma Frost and the Massachusetts Academy, so just getting even some insight into them in this book was really great. So in conclusion, this is definitely worth a pickup, I think. Even if you have not read the first omnibus, I think there's a lot of really iconic storylines and issues in here that make it well worth the purchase. I want to thank all you guys for watching. We are so close to 500 subscribers, so if you're not subscribed, please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I've actually got a lot more omnibus videos coming out soon, a lot of X-Men omnibuses to be specific, because I am catching up on so many books right now, so those will be coming out shortly. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.